Okay, I guess we're gonna try this again. Part of the research that I'm doing for my current book is dealing with Lincoln's position on the Dred Scott case, which obviously has required that I begin looking deeper into the Dred Scott case. And one of my biggest pet peeves is in history when American history is taught strategically leaving something out. And, when this becomes your job, you begin to think about not just what's not there, but why isn't it there? And I am beginning to notice more and more of the feelings that I have tend to seen voiced amongst minorities is that minorities are left out of historic conversations to either erase their relevance, which is true, to for the dominant population, white population, to take credit for what they did, which is true. But I'm beginning to find something, especially in the day in politics in which I'm living, that there is a purposeful and overriding objective to miseducate poor white people. And certain bits of information that are highlights of history, things that are regularly talked about, different parts of that is being left out to maintain specific divisions, in particular, Dred Scott. In the Dred Scott case, oh, thank you, wife. Isn't she wonderful? Um, in the Dred Scott case, we're not told that the people who funded Dred Scott's case were his original owners. Now, does this absolve Peter Blow for being a slave owner? Heck no. But it does say something about his sons. This is 1856. These white, rich, wealthy enough to have slaves and own slaves, wealthy young men, and also wealthy enough to pay for somebody else's court fees all the way to the Supreme Court. That's not easy to do now. They could have easily mailed it in. My dad shouldn't have did that. That was on dad. We're good. Keep moving forward. I'm worried about what I do. I'm not worried about what my dad did. But the Blow family kept up with Dred Scott, knew who he was. And even though their father sold him to somebody else, when they heard about the case, they were like, wait a minute, that's the guy we grew up with. They paid for the brothers' court fees. And when he lost the Dred Scott decision, they purchased him and his family and freed them. Now, why would we not want white people to know that? If we are arguing that this is a non-racist country, if we want to argue that this is a post-racial society at least, why would we want to ignore Deloach, my man? Why would we want to keep these things out of mainstream history? Some of the beautiful things that white Americans did at a time that it was life or death to do it, because the Klan swung a sharp sword in both directions. The reason why the Klan was so feared was because not only did they terrorize black people, they terrorized black sympathizers, white people. So, what do we have to gain by not teaching this? It's in the history books, and you can find it on Google. Google is not research, but I'm saying it's that easily accessible. It's not like you have to go to all these different archives to find this information out. We have to ask ourselves, who is in charge of our education, and why is this the goal? Why are we purposefully leaving out that portion of the Dred Scott case, that even when the courts got it wrong, some white community people got it right, made it right? And what else does that say? If they had the money, meaning the Blow family, to buy Dred Scott from John Sanford, they could have just bought him in the first place and freed him and just kept it pushing. They wanted the country to change. They put up their money for the country to change it, and it was known that they were the ones paying it. So we know by the Klan's activity and subsequent history that white racist people are violent toward non-racist white people. They're putting themselves in harm's way when they could have just did this under the table and just bought them and freed them and said, look, in the case, we'll just buy you. Because I'm sure it was cheaper to buy Dred Scott than it was to go all the way to the Supreme Court just to have to buy him anyway. And obviously, John Sanford was willing to sell him. But there were white people in the 1850s that were putting their life on the line, putting their money on the line, putting their reputation on the line because of what was right. It was not just John Brown. It wasn't just Thaddeus Stevens. It wasn't just Charles Sumner. It wasn't just the guy at the ferry, John Brown. Why are white heroes of abolition, of equalitarianism, of egalitarianism, why are they removed from history of stories that they are strategically connected to? Think about how many times we have heard of Dred Scott and never heard of the Blow family. In a country that is overtly having a political conversation of not being racist, why is our education not full of instances like this? Number one, it's not a lot, but why are we avoiding the ones that's there? What is it about white maleism that is conducive for separation more than integration? We will hear the stories about the brutal slave owners. We know who Taney is, the guy who wrote the opinion for Dred Scott, because it was mean, it was hateful, it was all of that. We even know who Beecher Stowe is, Uncle Tom's Cabin. But when it comes to white men, our educational system avoids white men that have paid the ultimate price. Charles Sumner taking that beating on the congressional floor. They caned him. Somebody who he wasn't even talking about. That's what the Blow family was opening themselves up to. This is the attitude. We don't talk about John Brown paid the ultimate price. Thaddeus Stevens said, if you're going, don't bury me where you bury the senators and the Congress people. Bury me in a cemetery where black people can be buried. Because in perpetuity, I want my point to be made. Ask most white people who Thaddeus Stevens is. Ask them who the Blow family is. Ask them who Charles Sumner is. In a country where race is so central, have you ever heard these conservative, educated people use as an example in their saying, this is not a racist country? These, John Brown, the Blow family, these situations show that there were people at all points throughout history that were white that pushed against the systems of violence and inequity. You don't hear that. Either because they don't know it, which is highly likely, but also it's not important for them to find it. But why don't they know it? Now, as a person who has the ability to highlight this information, that's one thing I am so excited about. But I also, when I'm teaching this to young white people, I want them not just to see that this is not being taught to people. I want them to see why it's not being taught to them. Why is it our education system avoids teaching young white people about the people in history that were white, that fought against the systems at the time it was going on? Why are they not being taught that? Why is it the current administration, because I like to tie all this stuff into why is this relevant? Why is he talking about something that happened in 1857? Because this is going on now. The administration is called systemic racism. Yeah, it is systemic racism. But this is the caveat to it. See, we think systemic racism, we think they are leaving us out, or the overt part of the case is that blacks couldn't be. But we don't think about rich whites controlling poor whites. That's the part of systemic racism I think most black people don't even fathom, nor white people. Because think about it, with Trump, with this revamping of American history, he's not saying, let's add good stuff about what. It wouldn't make white people feel bad, which is what he said. We're teaching kids to make them feel bad or make them shame. Okay, how about teaching them about the Blow family? That won't make them feel ashamed. How about teaching about Sumner? That won't make them ashamed. What about Thaddeus Stevens? That won't make them ashamed. And how many other people can we add to this list? Let's add this, but that's not what they're trying to do. And I'm not the only mid-19th century scholar. I'm sure there's plenty of better ones and definitely white ones. So why is it the conservative overview to reduce what we teach about black people as opposed to increase what we teach about white people? If you want them to feel better, there's stuff in United States history that makes them feel great. Or it'll show them, yes, it was people that were aware. The thing is, separatism, since Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, divide and conquer of the poor, is what has always balanced this country's economy. And that is what still balances it. That is why they want to change the education, but not add to it. They want to take from it. So as I was studying that, I said, I'm not breaking away from Lincoln because that definitely goes into something else that I have found out about Lincoln that's going into the book. But every time I find out something like this, I try to bring it out to the masses, not just in my class, but on everybody who follows the channel, because this is something everybody can think about. Just like we're wondering why our contributions are absent or under focused, why is the social equity exhibited particularly by white men ignored from history? Now it's there. It's there. It's written. Just like most of it is written. It's just they don't teach it. You can find it. You just got to look for it. But everybody's job is not to look for it. So most people aren't going to know. Again, Bacon's Rebellion is the prototype, the anti-miscegenation laws of 1681 that did not just create whiteness, that created the social structure of America, not just by race, but even within race, particularly between rich whites and poor whites. And that, the anti-miscegenation laws and that dynamic is why you see poor whites voting for the agendas of rich whites. If you ever wondered, like, if you look at a lot of Trump supporters, they're not wealthy people. I mean, the masses. They're not, if you look at them on TV, and they purposely are showing those people, they're not showing the billionaires that's getting all of this money from the insurance companies and grocery stores and meat companies and all that, because, my wife is telling everybody how steaks down in Texas is $50. And not the good steaks, just steak at all. They're not showing those billionaires as Trump supporters. Every time they show them, they show these poor, undereducated, working class people that are Trump, 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 Trump. That goes back to the agreement in 1681 where rich whites told poor whites, you can control the poor, everything that's allocated for the poor. We will take care of all the big money, but you get to control the courts, you get to control the education, you get to control all of the financial allocations, and you can rule that with impunity. It was that agreement that was breached in the civil rights movement, which is why the Southerners were attacking the black folks, because they were protesting the agreement with the rich whites. Wait a minute, this wasn't our agreement. You're bringing them up to us when the anti-miscegenation laws brought them down. Now you're going to make equal rights. That's not what we agreed upon. So they're protesting, but their protest was attacking us. And we were protesting against them, and the people were getting rich. The people who were attacking us, we were protesting against. They're attacking us, protesting against the people up there, but nobody is challenging the people up here. And they were just getting all the money. So as you go through history and as you run up on these things, just be looking for it. Be looking for anytime any group is represented as all bad, something's wrong. One thing history has shown is nobody or nothing is all anything all the time. Make sure you guys join the channel, hit that like button. You guys take it easy.